Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you're tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favorite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful with the world fading away outside, I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. On the winter solstice lodge, perched on the edge of a Norwegian fjord, like a grand stage set against icy mountains. Elegant guests gathered for a festive retreat, each playing their part in high society. Then Magnus Haraldsson, the wealthy host, was found dead in his study, poison in his champagne flute. The scene suggested suicide amid the glittering decorations. Police saw a man overwhelmed by business woes. But Hercule Poirot saw a performance. And someone in this theatre of snow and luxury was playing innocence, the role of murderer. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The winter solstice lodge stood dramatically on the steep edge of a Norwegian fjord, its Art Deco lines sharp against the snow-laden mountains. Crystal chandeliers caught the firelight, tinkling like distant bells whenever a draught slipped through the tall windows. The scent of hothouse lilies and expensive Worth perfume drifted through the grand hall, mingling with the rich smoke of Cuban cigars and the faint polish of mahogany panels. Outside, the night air was bitterly cold, pressing frost patterns onto the glass like a curtain drawn across the stage. Inside, everything was warm, elegant, rehearsed. Guests moved with the careful grace of actors taking their marks. Silk evening gowns rustled softly. Polished shoes clicked on parquet floors. Champagne flutes sparkled in gloved hands. The liquid inside chilled to perfection. And this was no ordinary Christmas gathering. It was a performance set in luxury, and tragedy waited in the wings. Hercule Poirot arrived last, stepping from a horse-drawn sleigh into the welcoming heat. He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from the sleeve of his impeccable dinner jacket and tilted his egg-shaped head, green eyes already scanning the cast. Magnus Haraldsson, the wealthy host and industrialist, dominated the scene like a leading man accustomed to applause. His laugh boomed too loudly, his broad shoulders squared under tailored wool. Yet Poirot noticed the faint tremor when he lifted his glass, the hand of a man playing confidence, while fear gnawed underneath. Ingrid Haraldsson, his wife, glided forward to greet the detective. Her silk gown shimmered silver blue, Chanel perfume trailing behind her like expensive smoke. She played the perfect hostess. Warm smile, gracious words, a light touch on Poirot's arm. But her eyes flicked once toward the tall windows where snow fell silently. And the gesture felt rehearsed. Their daughter Freya hovered near the fireplace, soft kid gloves twisting in her lap. She performed the role of the innocent young woman, wide eyes, gentle laughter, cheeks flushed from the fire's warmth. Yet her glances darted too often toward her brother, as though waiting for a cue. Eric, the son, stood apart in a rough tweed, a deliberate contrast to the velvet and silk around him. He sipped dry champagne and spoke little, playing the brooding air with practiced restraint. His fingers, however, drummed an uneven rhythm on the crystal stem, small but telling. Lars Olsen, Magnus's business partner, moved among the guests with easy charm. Sandalwood cologne clung to him. He carried a leather-bound notebook and offered smiles that never quite reached his eyes. The loyal friend, the dependable ally, His performance was smooth, almost too smooth. Dr. Victor Nielsen, a family physician and old acquaintance, nursed a glass of fine red wine near the piano. His calm face and measured words cast him as the steady supporting player, the one who observes rather than acts. Yet when he set the glass down, his hand lingered on the stem a second too long. Anna Berg, the quiet secretary, stayed in the background, arranging fresh roses in crystal vases. Her crisp linen blouse smelled faintly of soap and lilies. She played the invisible helper, efficient, unnoticed, and always present when needed. Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands. Mon ami, he murmured to no one in particular, the stage is beautifully set. Every actor knows their place. But who knows their lines? And who has forgotten them already? The grandfather clock in the hall chimed midnight, deep and solemn, marking the longest night of the year. Champagne corks popped in quick succession. Laughter rose and fell like waves. The fire crackled warmly, yet throwing shadows across velvet curtains. Magnus raised his glass for a toast. His voice rang out strong, too strong, perhaps. To family, to friends, to the turning of the year. Glasses clinked. The bitter-sweet taste of champagne lingered on tongues. Poirot watched the host's hand again. The tremor was there, brief but unmistakable. Ingrid leaned close to Lars to whisper something. Her perfume enveloped them both. The gesture was intimate, almost possessive. Eric saw it and looked away quickly. Freya's smile faltered for half a second before she recovered. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. You watch with Poirot, no? You see how this one's eyes avoid the other? Ask yourself, why the sudden glance away? Consider the psychology. What role does this person need to play tonight? A soft door closed upstairs. Magnus excused himself, pressing fingers to his temple. A slight headache, he said, with a smile that did not convince. So I shall rest a moment in the study. Footsteps faded along the corridor. The distant piano continued its slow, melancholy tune. Time passed. Conversations flowed like scripted dialogue. The fire popped. Rain began to tap against the windows, soft at first, then insistent. The chill from outside seemed to creep under the doors. Then came the scream. Anna Berg stumbled from the upper landing, face white. Mr. Harrelson, he is dead. The cast froze for one perfect moment, a tableau of shock. And then movement erupted. Doors opened, footsteps pounded. Poirot moved calmly toward the study, green eyes gleaming with interest. Magnus lay slumped across his desk. Foam flecked his lips. An empty champagne flute had tipped, golden liquid pooling on polished wood. The sharp, bitter smell of cyanide cut through the wood smoke and ink. Papers lay scattered, business letters, figures in red. The police arrived within the hour, snow clinging to their coats. They examined the scene, nodded gravely. A suicide, the inspector declared. Business troubles, debts. The note is there, unsigned but clear enough. Poirot stood apart, hands clasped behind his back. Mais non, he said softly. This is no solo performance. This is murder, staged with care. The curtain has risen, and the leading actor has already taken his bow. Observe this performance carefully. Ingrid enters the study. She gasps. The handkerchief flutters to her eyes. Her shoulders shake in perfect rhythm. Grief beautifully rendered. But the handkerchief stays perfectly dry. No tears streak the powder. The mascara remains flawless. The performance of grief is technically perfect. Too perfect. I'm reminded of the Styles case, where a woman performed widow's devastation so convincingly that even experienced officers hesitated. She had rehearsed the sobs, timed the collapse, practiced the trembling lip. Yet one detail betrayed her. She reached for the will too steadily, her fingers calm, while the rest of her body performed anguish. The body knows truth even when the face lies. This is what the little grey cells understand, the psychology beneath the costume. Therefore, this Ingrid may have known of the death before the scream. Her sorrow is a mask, not a feeling. You see it now, no? The theatre of crime has already begun its first act. The tension rises. Someone will break character soon. This actor plays grief. But observe the eyes. Where is the moisture? On too perfect, too rehearsed. Truth stumbles. Lies flow smooth. Rain drummed harder on the windows. The fire snapped. Poirot arranged 3 pens on the desk into perfect symmetry. The stage was set. The actors had taken their places. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the players. The drawing room of Winter Solstice Lodge felt smaller now that death had entered the building. The fire still crackled warmly in the grate, but the heat no longer comforted. Instead, it threw long, restless shadows across velvet curtains and polished mahogany. The scent of lilies had turned cloying, mixing uneasily with the sharp trace of bitter medicine that lingered from the study. Outside, snow continued to fall, muffling every sound except the soft ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional pop of burning logs. Hercule Poirot stood near the center of the room, like a director surveying his cast before the first real rehearsal. He had arranged 5 high-backed chairs in a neat semicircle, facing one larger armchair, his own. The symmetry pleased him. He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve and spoke in his precise, measured voice. Mesdames et messieurs, the tragedy has occurred. Now we begin the true performance. Each of you will speak with Poirot. Each scene will reveal something. Some lines will be true. Some will be rehearsed. He gestured toward the first chair. Ingrid Haraldsen rose first, its silk gown whispering as she moved. She sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap, the picture of composed widowhood. Expensive Chanel perfume drifted forward with her. I was in the drawing room the entire time after Magnus went upstairs. She began, voice low and steady. Freya was with me. We spoke of Christmas plans, of the tree we would decorate tomorrow. I heard nothing unusual until Anna screamed. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. You heard nothing. Not a footstep, not a door, not the smallest sound from the study. Nothing. Her gaze remained level. I was occupied with grief even before the news came. A wife feels these things. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. You watch with Poirot, no? You see how calm the hands remain. No tremble, no fidget. Grief, when fresh and real, usually disturbs the surface. This performance is very smooth. Ingrid's lips tightened for half a second, almost imperceptible. Almost. Next came Eric. The son took the chair with deliberate heaviness. Rough tweed jacket creased, smelling faintly of cigar smoke and wet snow from an earlier walk. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. I was in the library, alone, reading an old sailing log my father kept years ago. I wanted quiet, that's all. And the time? Poirot asked gently. From perhaps 20 minutes after father left until the scream. I didn't look at the clock. No one saw you. No, I didn't need witnesses. I was reading. Poirot made a small expressive gesture. But mon ami, the careful observer, and you are becoming careful, will you not, will notice something interesting. The library fire was low when we checked, yet you say you sat there for nearly an hour. A man truly reading does not let the fire die unless his mind is elsewhere. Consider the psychology. What role does a son need to play when his father dies suddenly? Eric's jaw clenched. I was reading, he repeated. Freya entered next, unsoft kid gloves still on, twisting them now like a prayer rope. Her cheeks were flushed. From the fire or from nerves, Poirot could not yet say. I stayed with Mother most of the time, she said quickly. We talked about the solstice party we planned next year. I fetched her a fresh glass of champagne once, that's all. Poirot leaned forward slightly. You fetched champagne. From where? The sideboard, there. She pointed. I poured it myself. And you did not go near the study corridor? No? Her voice wavered on the single word. Her eyes filled suddenly. Genuine moisture this time, or very well practiced. Observe the eyes now, Poirot murmured. Moisture appears, but only after the question about the corridor. Interesting timing, no? Lars Olsen followed, calm and collected. Sandalwood cologne preceded him. He sat as though this were a board meeting. I stepped outside for air after the toast. The terrace. I needed to think about tomorrow's meeting in Oslo. I returned perhaps 15 minutes later. I was back in the hall when the scream came. Poirot raised one eyebrow. You walked on the terrace, in this snow, in evening shoes. I like fresh air, even in winter. And your footprints? Gone already. The wind was strong. It drifts quickly here. Poirot smiled a small, polite smile. May we? The wind. Convenient witness. The wind. It removes evidence so neatly. Dr. Victor Nielsen came last. He carried the calm authority of his profession, though his fingers drummed once on the arm of the chair before he caught himself. I remained here in the drawing room most of the evening, he said. I spoke with Anna for a time about a patient in the village. Then I played a little piano, something quiet, nothing loud enough to disturb anyone. I heard the scream and ran upstairs with the others. You are a doctor, Poirot observed. You would recognize poison quickly. I would. And I did. A cyanide. Fast. Mercifully fast. Mercifully, Poirot repeated softly. A curious word for murder. The doctor met his gaze without flinching. I said what I saw. When the last interview ended, Poirot stood and walked slowly around the semicircle of chairs. The fire snapped. Rain tapped insistently at the windows. The crystal chandelier above gave a faint, musical shiver in the draught. Each of you has given Poirot a performance, he said. Some convincing, some less so. Alibis overlap in places, contradict in others. A wife who hears nothing, a son who lets the fire die, a daughter whose tears arrive on cue, a partner whose footprints vanish, a doctor who finds mercy in poison. He stopped in front of the empty fireplace and looked at each face in turn. The players have entered the stage. They have spoken their first lines. But who spoke truth? And who spoke only theater? He made one final expressive gesture with his small, neat hands. I think every actor had taken their mark. But who played truth? And who played the murderer? Chapter 3. The First Act. The study door remained closed, sealed now by police tape that looked strangely thin and modern against the heavy oak. Inside, the air still carried the sharp bite of cyanide beneath the familiar wood smoke and spilled champagne. Outside in the corridor, the grandfather clock struck two slow, deliberate notes. The house had grown quieter, but as though the building itself held its breath after the first scream. Hercule Poirot moved through the upper landing with small, precise steps. He had asked that the cast remain downstairs in the drawing room. No one was to wander. Yet already the performance was shifting. Masks that held during the initial shock now showed hairline cracks. He began with Freya. She sat alone on the window seat in the small morning room, knees drawn up beneath her silk dress, and the cold glass behind her fogged with every breath. When Poirot entered, she started, then forced a small, brave smile. "Miss Freya," he began gently, "you told Poirot you remained with your mother all evening. Yet Annaberg remembers seeing you near the study corridor. Only for a moment," she says, carrying a small tray. Freya's gloved fingers tightened on the edge of her skirt. I did go upstairs once to fetch Mother's shawl. She felt a chill, and I was only there a minute." Poirot tilted his head. "A minute. Long enough to pass the study door. Long enough, perhaps, to hear something. Or to see someone." Her eyes filled again. This time the tears came faster, less controlled. "Father and I argued earlier about my future. He didn't approve of someone I care for. I said terrible things. I told him I wished he would just disappear." Her voice cracked. "But I didn't mean. I would never." The mask slipped. Not dramatically, not theatrically. Quietly. The innocent ingenue role gave way to raw, frightened girl. Her shoulders shook with real sobs now, mascara finally streaking. Poirot watched without speaking for several seconds. Then he said softly, "Bravo. But this time, mademoiselle, the performance is no longer rehearsed. This is truth breaking through. Observe this performance carefully." Freya plays the grieving daughter. She weeps, yes. The handkerchief presses to her eyes. The voice trembles appropriately. But the tell, when she speaks of the quarrel, her hands stop twisting the gloves. They fall open, helpless. A body cannot fake helplessness so completely. The psychology is clear. I am reminded of the case of young Raymond Boynton on the shores of the Dead Sea. A son performed filial devotion so perfectly, attentive, concerned, ever at his mother's side, that no one suspected the smothered rage beneath. He rehearsed every gesture, the gentle hand on her arm, the worried frown, the murmured reassurances. Yet one evening, unobserved for a moment, he stood at the cliff edge, and his fists clenched, not in grief, but in anticipation. The body remembers what the mind tries to hide. In that affair, as here, resentment wore the mask of love until pressure forced the truth to surface. The little grey cells always recognize the moment when performance becomes confession. Therefore, Freya's anger was real. But her guilt is only the guilt of words, not of poison. You see it now. No. The first crack has appeared. Next, Poirot turned to Eric in the library. The son stood before the dying fire, back to the door, staring into the embers. The smell of old paper and cigar ash hung heavy. "You let the fire burn low," Poirot observed. "A man reading peacefully does not neglect warmth, unless his thoughts are far from the page." Eric turned. His face was flushed, not from heat, but from something deeper. "I wasn't reading the whole time. I was thinking about the company, about how father planned to cut me out of the board after the next meeting. He told me so tonight, quietly, in the billiard room. Said I lacked discipline. The words came out hard, bitten off. No tears, no trembling lip, just cold, contained fury. Poirot nodded slowly. Anger, then. Not grief. Not yet. I hated him sometimes, Herrick admitted. But I didn't kill him. The mask here was different, less polished, more brittle. The dutiful heir had never been a comfortable role. Downstairs, de Poirot found Ingrid still seated in the drawing room, posture perfect, hands folded. Lars hovered nearby, offering a glass of water she did not take. Poirot approached them both. Madame, you say you heard nothing, yet the study door is not far from this room. A man choking, gasping, such sounds carry. Ingrid lifted her chin. I was distraught. My mind was elsewhere. Distraught? Poirot repeated. And yet your handkerchief, when you wept earlier, remained quite dry. No smear of powder, no dampness. Grief that leaves no trace is unusual. Her lips parted, then closed. For the first time, a flicker crossed her face, something between fear and calculation. Lars stepped forward. Inspector, you're distressing her unnecessarily. Poirot turned to him. And you, Monsieur Olsen. Your walk on the terrace. No footprints, you say. Yet the snow fell steadily all evening. The wind may cover tracks, but not perfectly. Not in 15 minutes. Lars smiled thinly. Oh, I have nothing to hide. Perhaps, Poirot murmured. But the psychology suggests otherwise. Two people who glance at each other too often. Two people whose alibis lean upon each other. An alliance. Or a conspiracy. The room grew still. The fire snapped. Rain tapped insistently at the windows, like impatient fingers. Poirot walked to the center of the carpet and turned slowly, taking in every face. The first act has concluded. Some masks have cracked. Freya's from guilt of words. Eric's from anger too long suppressed. Others still hold. For now. He touched his moustache with precision. The tension rises. Someone will break character soon. Watch carefully, mon ami. This actor plays grief. But observe the eyes. Where is the moisture? Too perfect, too rehearsed. Truth stumbles. Lies flow smooth. Outside, the fjord wind moaned low against the lodge. Inside, the crystal chandelier gave one faint musical shiver. The first mask had cracked. More would follow. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. The drawing room had begun to feel like a rehearsal space after too many run-throughs. The fire still burned, but its warmth now seemed forced, almost theatrical. Velvet curtains had been drawn tighter against the driving snow, muffling the wind to a low, impatient moan. The scent of lilies had faded, replaced by the sharper notes of strong continental coffee and the lingering trace of Ingrid's Chanel perfume, cloying now, like a scent worn too long. Hercule Poirot had asked the entire cast to remain seated in their earlier places. No one was permitted to leave the room. He stood before them like a director who has decided the first preview needs drastic cuts. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice calm but carrying the weight of inevitability. Your lines have been spoken. Now we test the scripts. Alibis are fragile things. They crack when pressure is applied correctly. He turned first to Ingrid Haraldsen. Madame, you insist you remained here with Freya the entire time after your husband went upstairs. Yet Freya has admitted she left the room briefly to fetch your shawl. She was gone perhaps 5 minutes. In that window, where were you? Ingrid's posture remained perfect, spine straight against the velvet cushion. I sat here, waiting, thinking of Magnus. Thinking, Poirot repeated softly. Yet Anna Berg, passing through the hall on her way to the kitchen, he saw the drawing room door ajar and noticed the room empty for several moments. No one sat in this chair. Ingrid's fingers tightened on the silk of her gown. The rustle was audible in the sudden quiet. Perhaps Anna was mistaken. Perhaps, Poirot murmured. But mistakes are rarely so convenient. He moved to Eric next. You, monsieur, claim you sat in the library reading. Yet the book you named, an old sailing log, was still on the shelf when I examined it. Dust undisturbed. I know one had opened it that evening. The fire, too, had burned very low. A reader feels cold eventually, unless his mind is too occupied to notice. Eric's jaw worked. I may have dozed for a moment, or stared into the fire. Memory plays tricks. Memory, Poirot said. Or rehearsal. A good actor remembers his blocking. A nervous one forgets small details. Lars Olsen leaned forward, attempting to project calm authority. My walk on the terrace was brief, 15 minutes at most, and the snow covered my tracks quickly. You cannot prove otherwise. Poirot tilted his head. I do not need to prove footprints, monsieur. I need only observe the shoes you wear now, still damp at the edges, yet the snow outside has been falling heavily for hours. Damp shoes suggest a much more recent walk, perhaps after the scream, perhaps to check something, or to remove something. Lars glanced down involuntarily. His smile thinned. Dr. Victor Nielsen spoke before Poirot could turn to him. I have nothing to hide. I remained here, played the piano softly, spoke with Anna. My hands were never near any poison. Yet you are the only person in this house with ready access to medical supplies, Poirot observed. Cyanide, in small quantities, is sometimes kept for laboratory or emergency use. A doctor would know exactly how much is fatal and how quickly it acts. The doctor's calm cracked just a fraction. His fingers drummed once on the arm of his chair before he forced them still. Anna Berg sat last, small and pale against the dark velvet. She had not spoken unless spoken to. You prepared the tray of champagne after the toast, Poirot said gently. You poured the glasses. You carried them round. One of those glasses ended in the study with Monsieur Haraldsen. Tell Poirot, did you notice anything unusual about any bottle, any glass? Anna shook her head. Her voice was barely above a whisper. No, but everything was as usual. Yet a small vial was found in the pocket of your apron when the police searched earlier. Trace amounts of cyanide. Explain this. Tears welled instantly. It wasn't mine. Someone must have. Someone put it there. The room fell completely silent, except for the fire's soft crackle and the muffled patter of snow against glass. Poirot walked slowly along the semicircle, regarding each face in turn. Rehearsed lines always sound smooth at first, he said. But under lights, and they falter. Madame Haraldsen's alibi shifts when challenged. Monsieur Eric's book gathers dust. Monsieur Olsen's shoes betray a second walk. Dr. Nielsen speaks of innocence, yet his fingers dance when poison is named. Mademoiselle Berg weeps convincingly, perhaps too convincingly. He stopped in the center of the carpet. Observe, mon ami. This suspect plays their role too perfectly. The mask slips. Did you catch it? This performance, it is rehearsed. Truth does not rehearse. He made a small, expressive gesture with his neat hands. You watch with Poirot, no? You see how the hands tremble now? How the eyes avoid contact? Ask yourself, if you are hiding guilt, how would you perform innocence? The careful observer, and you are becoming careful, will notice the strain. The tension in the room was almost visible. A taut wire stretched between every chair. Ingrid's lips parted as though to speak, then closed again. Eric stared at the carpet. Lars adjusted his cuff with forced nonchalance. Dr. Nielsen exhaled slowly. Anna pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. Poirot drew himself up, small yet commanding. The scripts are failing. Rehearsed lines began to falter. Truth needed no rehearsal. Outside, the fjord wind rose suddenly, rattling the windows like an impatient audience, demanding the next act. Chapter 5. The mask slips. The drawing room felt smaller now, the air thicker with unspoken things. On the fire had burned down to glowing coals, casting a dull red light that flickered across every face and made the velvet curtains look almost black. The scent of lilies had finally died away, replaced by the faint bitterness of cold coffee left too long in porcelain cups, and the sharp, nervous trace of sweat beneath expensive cologne. Outside, the snow had stopped. Only the wind remained, low and restless, against the windows. Hercule Poirot had asked for Anna Berg to be brought to the study alone. The rest of the cast waited downstairs under the watchful eye of the young police sergeant. The study door closed behind them with a soft, final click. Anna stood near the desk where Magnus had died, hands clasped tightly in front of her crisp linen blouse. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed but dry now. She looked smaller than before, less the invisible helper, more the cornered figure. Poirot did not sit. He moved slowly around the room, touching nothing, only observing. Mademoiselle Berg, he began quietly, you have performed the role of the loyal secretary admirably, always present, never noticed, pouring champagne, arranging flowers, typing letters. Yet tonight, you carried something more dangerous than a tray. Anna's breath caught. I don't understand. Poirot stopped beside the desk and looked directly at her. A small vial was found in your apron pocket, trace cyanide. Or you said someone placed it there. But consider this. Only you handled the drinks after the toast. Only you moved among the guests with the tray. And only you had reason to pass close to the study door afterward. Tears welled again, but this time they spilled over immediately, hot, fast, unstoppable. She pressed both hands to her mouth as though to hold the sound inside. I loved him, she whispered. The words came out broken, raw. Not like a secretary should. I loved Magnus. For years. Quietly. He never saw it. Or if he did, he pretended not to. Tonight, he asked me to bring him a fresh glass, alone. I thought, maybe at last. She stopped, shoulders shaking violently now. Poirot watched without interrupting. The mask was falling, not in a dramatic flourish, but in pieces, quietly shattering. He told me he was tired, she continued, voice cracking. Tired of the business, of the family, of pretending. He said he wished it could all end. I thought he meant divorce or leaving. Not this. She looked up at Poirot, eyes wide and pleading. I didn't poison him. I swear it. But I found a letter on his desk after it happened. A letter he'd written to Ingrid, telling her he knew about her and Lars, that he was going to change the will, cut them both out. I burned it in the fireplace downstairs. I thought if no one knew, maybe the police would believe suicide. I was trying to protect him, even after he was gone. The confession hung in the air like smoke. No rehearsal, no careful pauses, just truth, jagged and painful. Poirot nodded once, slowly. Observe this performance, mon ami, he said softly, as though speaking to an invisible companion. At last, the mask falls completely. No more careful dabbing of dry eyes, no more perfectly timed pauses. Only the real face, hurting, guilty of hiding, but not of killing. He turned back to Anna. Your love was genuine. Your fear was genuine. Your action, burning the letter, was foolish, but understandable. And the psychology is clear. Devotion can drive a person to protect even the dead. But murder? No. That requires colder calculation. Anna sank into the chair behind her, head in her hands, sobbing quietly now. Poirot moved to the door and opened it. The sergeant waited outside. Escort Mademoiselle Berg downstairs, he said. She is not under arrest. Not yet. As Anna was led away, Poirot remained alone in the study for a moment. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, his green eyes gleaming in the low light. Next he summoned Dr. Victor Nielsen. The doctor entered calmly, though his usual measured step had tightened. He stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back. You are a man of science, Poirot began. You know poison, you know dosage. You pronounce death swiftly, mercifully fast, you said. A curious phrase. Nielsen met his gaze. Cyanide is fast. I merely stated fact. Yet your pulse races now, Poirot observed. Your hands clench when I speak of poison. The calm doctor mask is slipping, non? Nielsen exhaled sharply. Magnus and I were friends once, long ago, until he ruined a medical project I believed in, pulled funding because it wasn't profitable enough. I never forgave him. But I did not kill him. Resentment, Poirot murmured. It festers. It wears many masks, politeness, professionalism, calm. But the body betrays, always. He stepped closer. You had access to cyanide. You had motive. Yet your alibi holds. For now. We shall see. Nielsen said nothing more. His silence was louder than any denial. Poirot returned to the drawing room. The others looked up as he entered, faces strained, eyes wary. Eric stood suddenly. Enough of this. If you're going to accuse someone, do it. Stop these games. Poirot regarded him calmly. The games, as you call them, are nearly over. One mask has already fallen tonight. Anna's, beneath it. Love turned to desperate protection. A more will follow. He looked slowly around the circle. The tension rises. Someone will break character soon. We approach the final act. Have you identified the true performer yet, mon ami? He made a small, expressive gesture with his neat hands. The mask had fallen. Beneath it, the true face at last. Outside, the fjord lay silent under fresh snow. Inside, the coals hissed softly, as though the fire itself waited for the next line. And chapter 6. Behind the curtain, the lodge had grown unnaturally quiet after midnight. The drawing room fire had dwindled to a faint orange pulse, barely enough to warm the fingers. Velvet curtains hung heavy and still. No draught moved them now. The scent of furniture wax lingered stubbornly, undercut by the stale bitterness of untasted coffee and the faint, acrid memory of cigar smoke that clung to Eric's tweed. Outside, the fjord lay black and motionless under a sky thick with clouds. No moon, no stars. only the low moan of wind against stone. Hercule Poirot had retreated to the small library for a few moments of order. He sat at the reading table, arranging 3 pens and a leather-bound notebook into perfect alignment. The room smelled of old paper and polished wood, comforting in its predictability. He needed this brief pause before pulling back the final layers of curtain. He began with the fireplace in the study, where Anna had confessed to burning a letter. Poirot had already retrieved the remnants himself earlier, while the others were occupied downstairs. Charred fragments remained, enough to reconstruct phrases in Magnus Haraldsson's bold hand. Know about you and Lars. No longer tolerate changing the will. Freya will inherit the majority. The motive lay there in black ink and ash. Magnus had discovered the affair. He planned to disinherit his wife and her lover, freedom and fortune, both threatened in a single stroke. Poirot returned to the drawing room, carrying only the small metal tray that had once held champagne flutes. He set it on the low table with deliberate care. Mesdames et messieurs, he announced softly, we now step behind the curtain. The performance on stage was compelling, but backstage we find the real script. He looked first at Ingrid. Madame, your grief was beautifully staged. Yet the letter your husband wrote, the one Anna burned, spoke of your association with Monsieur Olsen, an association that would cost you dearly if made public. Divorce with nothing, no estate, no position, only scandal. Ingrid's face remained composed, but her knuckles whitened against the silk of her gown. Poirot turned to Lars. And you, monsieur, the loyal partner, the man who walked on the terrace to think. Yet your shoes were damp again later, after the body was found. Or you returned to the study, no? To remove something. Perhaps the glass you feared carried your fingerprints. Or perhaps to ensure the scene looked like suicide. Lars opened his mouth, then closed it. His sandalwood cologne suddenly seemed too strong, almost offensive. Poirot moved to Freya. Mademoiselle, your secret was simpler, but no less heavy. Your father opposed your engagement to Dr. Nielsen. He called it unsuitable. A doctor with no fortune, no name in industry. And you argued fiercely that evening. Words were said that cannot be unsaid. But poison? No. Your mask was resentment, not murder. Freya looked down at her kid gloves, twisting them once more. This time the gesture was small, exhausted. Eric spoke before Poirot could address him. And me? He demanded, voice rough. What backstage secret do I hide? Poirot regarded him calmly. You, mon fils, hid financial ruin. Your father discovered irregularities in the company accounts. Small embezzlements you made to cover gambling debts. He confronted you tonight in the billiard room. He told you the board would know. You would be removed, disgraced. Yet again, anger is not the same as cyanide in a glass. Eric sank back into his chair, the fight draining from him like air from a punctured balloon. Finally, Poirot looked at Dr. Nielsen. You, doctor, carried the oldest grudge. Magnus withdrew funding from your research into a new anesthetic, work that could have saved lives. He called it unprofitable. You never forgave the decision, yet opportunity alone does not make a murderer. You had access to cyanide, yes, but your hands were steady when you examined the body. A guilty man's hands tremble. Yours did not. Nielsen exhaled slowly. I hated him, but I did not kill him. Poirot nodded once. Behind every curtain, a secret waits. An affair. a disinheritance, a forbidden love, a theft, a professional betrayal. Each secret feeds a motive. Each motive wears a mask on stage. But the stage is only half the theater. He stepped to the center of the room, small hands, making a slow, encompassing gesture. Observe, mon ami. This cast has performed division so convincingly, yet their secrets connect like threads behind the scenes. Ingrid and Lars, lovers plotting a future without Magnus. Freya and the doctor, lovers kept apart by the same man. Erik, son pushed toward ruin by the same father. Anna, devoted shadow-burning evidence to protect a memory. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Ask yourself, when so many threads lead back to one man, who had most reason to cut them all at once? The coals hissed softly. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 3, deep, measured, final. Poirot smoothed his moustache with precision. Behind every curtain, a secret. Behind every secret, a motive. The backstage is revealed. Now only the final act remains. Outside, the fjord wind rose again, rattling the windows like fingers drumming on a lid. Inside, no one moved. The theater had grown very still. Chapter 7. The Final Act. The drawing room of Winter Solstice Lodge had become a true theater now. Every chair was occupied. Every face turned towards the center, like an audience waiting for the curtain speech. The fire had been built up again. Flames snapped brightly, throwing sharp shadows across velvet and polished mahogany. The scent of fresh hothouse roses, replaced only an hour ago, mixed with the faint bitterness of cold coffee and the lingering trace of Ingrid's Chanel perfume. Outside, the fjord lay silent under new snow. Inside, the grandfather clock ticked with slow, deliberate menace. Hercule Poirot stood in the exact middle of the carpet, small but commanding, hands clasped behind his back. He had arranged the chairs in a perfect semicircle. No one sat behind another. Everyone could see everyone else. No hiding. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice calm, carrying effortlessly. You have each performed for Hercule Poirot, some with talent, some with desperation, some with lies so beautifully rehearsed they almost convinced even me for a moment. He paused, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Now, the final act. Let us review the performances, one by one. No more masks, no more scripts, only truth. He turned first to Freya. Mademoiselle Freya, you played the innocent daughter. Wide eyes, gentle tears, the ingenue who could do no wrong. Yet we learned of your quarrel with your father, the forbidden engagement, the angry words. You had motive, but your tears, when they finally came, were real. Your hands fell open in true helplessness. You are innocent of murder. Your mask was only fear and youth. Freya exhaled shakily, head bowing in relief. And next, Erik. Monsieur Erik, you performed the brooding air. Rough tweed, silent anger. The sun pushed too far. You hid embezzlement. You hid gambling debts. You hid rage that your father would disgrace you publicly. Motive, yes. Opportunity, perhaps. But when confronted, your fury spilled out raw. No careful rehearsal. You broke character honestly. You are not the murderer. Eric's shoulders dropped. He stared at the carpet, breathing hard. Poirot moved to Anna. Mademoiselle Berg, you played the devoted shadow, quiet, efficient, invisible. Yet beneath that mask beat a heart that loved in silence for years. You burned the letter to protect a dead man's memory. Foolish, yes. Guilty of concealment, yes. But not of poison. Your breakdown in the study was complete. No dry handkerchief, no perfect mascara. Truth tore through. You are cleared. Anna pressed a hand to her mouth, tears slipping silently. Dr. Nielsen sat very still. Doctor, you performed calm professionalism, while the steady physician, the man who pronounced death mercifully fast, you carried resentment, old, deep, professional. You had access to cyanide, yet your hands never trembled when you examined the body. A guilty man's pulse races in such moments. Yours did not. You are innocent of this crime. Nielsen gave one small nod, expression unreadable. Lars Olsen leaned forward, attempting a smile that did not reach his eyes. Monsieur Olsen, Poirot continued, you played the loyal partner. Smooth charm and sandalwood cologne, helpful suggestions. Yet your shoes were damp twice, once after a supposed brief walk, once after the body was discovered. You returned to the study. Why? To remove a glass, to adjust the scene? You and Ingrid exchanged glances too often, too intimately. An alliance, but not the leading role. Lars opened his mouth. Poirot raised one small hand. No, not yet. Finally, he turned to Ingrid Haraldsen. And you, Madame, you gave the most convincing performance of all. Ingrid sat perfectly straight, chin lifted, silk gown gleaming in the firelight. You played the grieving widow. Shock, outrage, tears on cue. The handkerchief fluttered so gracefully, the shoulders shook in a perfect rhythm. Magnifique, a technical masterpiece, but one fatal error. He stepped closer. Observe this performance carefully. When Anna screamed and we rushed to the study, you wept. The handkerchief dabbed. No mascara remained flawless. No moisture touched the cloth. No streak marred the powder. Grief that leaves no trace is not grief. It is costume. Ingrid's lips parted, but no sound came. Poirot's voice dropped, almost gentle. You knew of the death before the scream. You knew because you placed the cyanide in the champagne glass yourself. The glass you handed him during the toast, while everyone watched the bubbles rise. The one glass you touched last. And the letter Anna burned told you everything. Magnus knew of the affair. He would change the will. You and Lars would lose everything. So you acted quietly, efficiently, mercilessly. Ingrid's composure shattered. Her hands flew to her face, not to wipe tears, but to cover the sudden, ugly twist of panic. The mask slips. Did you catch it? Poirot asked the room softly. The eyes dry, the performance perfect. Too perfect. Truth does not rehearse. He addressed them all once more. I'm reminded of the Ackroyd affair. A killer performed normalcy so flawlessly, helpful, shocked, cooperative, that suspicion passed him by for days. He rehearsed every gesture, every word. Yet one small moment betrayed him. He reached too eagerly for resolution. The body knows truth even when the face lies. Here, as there, guilt wore the mask of innocence until the spotlight found it. He drew himself up to his full, still modest, height. Madame Ingrid Haraldsen, the curtain falls on your performance. The truth takes its bow. Ingrid collapsed forward, a low, broken sound escaping her. Lars reached instinctively toward her, then froze as the police sergeant stepped forward. Poirot made one final, expressive gesture with his neat hands. The final act has concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. The fire snapped once, sharply, like applause that had forgotten to be kind. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The drawing room of Winter Solstice Lodge felt suddenly vast and empty, even though every chair was still occupied. The fire burned high now, fed by fresh logs the police sergeant had added, but its warmth could not touch the chill that had settled over the cast. Velvet curtains hung motionless. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 4 with slow, hollow notes that seemed to echo longer than usual. The scent of roses had turned faintly sickly in the overheated air, demingling with the sharp metallic tang of handcuffs and the faint, nervous sweat that no amount of expensive perfume could mask. Ingrid Haraldson sat rigid in her chair, wrists already circled by cold steel. She no longer attempted the grieving widow's pose. Her silk gown, once shimmering like moonlight on snow, now looked crumpled and ordinary. Her face, powder-streaked at last, mascara finally running in thin black lines, was stripped bare. No performance left, only the raw, stunned expression of someone who had believed the script would never end. The sergeant stood behind her, one hand resting lightly on the chair back, not roughly, but firmly. Lars Olsen sat 2 seats away, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles showed white. He had not been handcuffed yet, but his eyes kept darting toward Ingrid, then away, as though the sight burned. Hercule Poirot remained standing in the center of the carpet. He had not raised his voice once during the revelation. He did not need to. The truth had spoken loudly enough. Madame Haraldson, the sergeant said quietly, "You're under arrest for the murder of Magnus Haraldson. Anything you say." Ingrid did not seem to hear the formal words. She looked up at Poirot, eyes wide and classy. "How did you know?" she whispered. The voice was small, cracked, nothing like the smooth tones she had used all evening. "The handkerchief. It was dry. That was all?" Poirot inclined his head slightly. "Not all, madame. The handkerchief was the tell, the moment the mask slipped visibly. But the little grey cells had already seen the pattern. The intimate glance at Lars, the too perfect alibi, the absence of genuine grief when the body was found. You performed shock and sorrow with technical brilliance. But emotion cannot be rehearsed so flawlessly. The body betrays. Always." Ingrid's head dropped forward. A single sob escaped. Real this time, ugly and ragged. Eric rose slowly from his chair. His rough tweed jacket hung loose on him now. The brooding air had vanished. What remained was a tired, hollow-eyed man. "So it's over," he said, almost to himself. No more pretending father would change his mind. No more hiding the accounts. No more waiting for the axe to fall. He looked at Ingrid, not with hatred, but with something closer to pity. "You could have asked for a divorce. He might have given you something. Anything was better than this." Ingrid did not answer. She stared at the carpet, as though it held the last line of her script. Freya stood next. Her kid gloves were gone. Her hands trembled openly now. She crossed to Anna and took the older woman's fingers in hers. "You tried to protect him," Freya said softly. "Even after everything." "Thank you." Anna managed a small watery smile. Tears still shone on her cheeks, but her shoulders had straightened. The devoted shadow had stepped into light at last. Dr. Nilsson remained seated, but his posture had eased. The calm professional mask was no longer needed. Beneath it had always been a man who simply disliked another man. Nothing more dangerous than that. "I'll make arrangements for the family," he said quietly to no one in particular. "Medical certificates, the necessary papers. It's the least I can do. Poirot watched them all, green eyes thoughtful. Observe, mon ami, he murmured, as though addressing an invisible companion. The masks are removed. The performances end. What remains is only the human being, flawed, relieved, grieving, shamed. The theater empties, but the actors must still live with what they played. He made a small, expressive gesture with his neat hands. The sergeant will take Madame Haraldson to the station in the morning. Monsieur Olsen, you will accompany us for questioning regarding your knowledge of events. The rest, you are free to go. But freedom comes with truth now. No more roles to hide behind. Lars stood abruptly. I didn't know, he said hoarsely. Not about the poison. I thought we would wait. Divorce, a settlement. Not this. Poirot regarded him without expression. Perhaps. But you returned to the study after the scream. To check, to protect. Complicity wears its own mask, monsieur. Lars sank back down, face in his hands. The sergeant helped Ingrid to her feet. She moved like a sleepwalker, steps uncertain on the parquet. At the doorway, she paused. Her looked back once at the room where she had played hostess for so many years. No one spoke. The door closed softly behind her. Poirot walked to the window and drew back one curtain. Dawn was still hours away, but the snow had stopped. The fjord stretched dark and calm below, reflecting the first faint grey of the sky. The performance is over, he said quietly. No applause follows this kind of theatre. Only justice, quiet, inevitable, final. He let the curtain fall back into place. Now Herrick crossed to the fire and stood staring into the flames. Freya and Anna sat close together on the sofa, hands still linked. Dr. Nilsson rose and moved to pour fresh coffee. Small, ordinary acts that felt suddenly profound in the stillness. The grandfather clock chimed the quarter hour, soft, almost gentle. No one applauded. No one needed to. No applause for this performance. Only justice. In Chapter 9, after the show, the Winter Solstice Lodge stood quieter in the pale light of late morning than it had at any moment during the long night. Snow had ceased falling. Sunlight filtered weakly through high clouds, glinting off fresh drifts and turning the fjord into a sheet of hammered silver. Inside, the grand drawing room felt changed, not merely emptied, but transformed. Velvet curtains had been drawn wide to let in the day. The fire burned low and steady, its crackle soft now, almost companionable. The scent of hothouse roses had been replaced by the clean smell of pine from an open window, and the comforting aroma of strong continental coffee brewing in the kitchen. Crystal glasses from the night before had been cleared away. Only a few porcelain cups remained on the low table. The cast, no longer actors in a tragedy, moved through the space with the tentative steps of people waking from a shared nightmare. Erik Haraldson stood at the tall window overlooking the fjord, her hands in the pockets of his rough tweed jacket. The brooding air had vanished. What remained was a man of 34, suddenly responsible for an empire he had once tried to steal from. He turned as Poirot entered the room. I've spoken to the lawyers in Oslo, Erik said quietly. The will stands as it was before last night. Father never had time to change it. The company is mine to run, properly this time. No more hiding debts. No more pretending I was ready when I wasn't. Poirot inclined his head. A heavy curtain has lifted, no? Freedom comes with weight. Erik gave a small, tired smile. I'll manage. I have to. Freya sat on the sofa beside Anna Berg. The two women had not separated since Ingrid's arrest. Freya's kid gloves lay discarded on the cushion. Her hands rested openly in her lap, no longer twisting. Anna's crisp linen blouse was creased from the long night, but her posture had straightened, less shadow, might more presence. I telephoned Victor this morning, Freya said. He's coming back after he finishes at the station. He says there's no reason we can't be married now. No opposition, no arguments. Anna reached over and squeezed Freya's fingers. Your father would have wanted you happy. In time, he would have seen it. Freya nodded, eyes bright but calm. I think so too. The anger's gone. Only sadness remains, and even that feels lighter. Anna looked across the room at Poirot. I've decided to leave the company. I've typed enough letters, arranged enough flowers. I want something smaller. A bookshop, perhaps. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere mine. Poirot's green eyes gleamed with quiet approval. A fine role to choose, mademoiselle. One where the lines are your own. Dr. Victor Nielsen arrived soon after, coat dusted with snow, medical bag in hand. He had spent the early hours at the local station, giving statements and signing forms. He looked older than the night before. Not weary, but relieved, as though a long-carried burden had finally been set down. I've arranged for the body to be moved this afternoon, he told Eric. The formalities are nearly complete. After that, I'll help with the estate medical records if you need me. Eric nodded. I'd appreciate it. Nielsen crossed to Freya and Anna. He did not speak at first. He simply sat beside Freya and took her hand. No grand declaration, but only the quiet certainty of two people who had waited long enough. Lars Olsen had not returned to the lodge. The police had taken him to Oslo for further questioning. His sandalwood cologne no longer lingered in the air. His leather-bound notebook lay forgotten on a side table. Evidence now, not a prop. Poirot moved among them like a director after the final performance, observing without directing. He paused beside the fireplace, touching his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. Observe, mon ami, he murmured softly. The theater has emptied. The masks are discarded. What remains are ordinary people, flawed, yes, but no longer performing. Eric steps into leadership without deceit. Freya claims love without fear. Anna seeks solitude without devotion's chains. Victor finds peace without old grudges. Even Ingrid, in her cell, wears no more costume. Truth strips everything bare, and in that bareness, healing begins. He turned to face them all. I'm reminded of the cards on the table affair. 4 players sat at a bridge table, each hiding motive behind polite smiles and clever bids. One murdered, the others concealed truths of their own. When the cards were laid down, no one applauded. But each walked away, changed, freer perhaps, for having been seen truly at last. So here. The performance ends. The lessons remain. Freya looked up at him. Will we ever forget this night? Non, mademoiselle, Poirot answered gently. Nor should you. A memory is the best teacher. It reminds us why masks are dangerous, and why truth, though painful, liberates. Eric crossed the room and poured coffee for everyone. Simple cups, no champagne flutes, no toasts, only warmth passed from hand to hand. Outside, the fjord began to sparkle as the sun climbed higher. A distant sleigh bell rang, supplies arriving, life continuing. Poirot arranged 3 coffee spoons, into perfect symmetry on the tray. The theater emptied, but the lessons lingered. He sipped his coffee slowly, green eyes thoughtful, already looking toward the next curtain that would rise somewhere else. Chapter 10. Poirot Reviews the Performance. Hercule Poirot sat alone in the small salon of his Brussels apartment 3 days later. The winter light filtered weakly through lace curtains, casting soft patterns across the polished mahogany table. A pot of tisane steamed gently beside him, on its herbal fragrance mingling with the faint scent of sandalwood from the nearby cabinet and the clean wax polish of the floor. The fire in the grate crackled low and steady, a comforting counterpoint to the silence outside. No fjord wind howled here, only the distant chime of a church bell marking the hour. He had arranged the morning's post into 3 neat piles, symmetry restored after days of disorder. One envelope contained the Oslo police report. Ingrid Haraldsen, formally charged with murder. Lars Olsen as accessory after the fact. Another held a brief grateful note from Erik Haraldsen. The company books were being audited honestly for the first time in years. A third, from Freya, spoke of wedding plans in spring, simple, quiet, with Anna Berg standing as witness. Poirot sipped his tisane slowly, green eyes thoughtful, beneath the neat curve of his moustache. The theatre of Winter Solstice Lodge has closed its doors, he murmured to the empty room. The curtain fell. The actors dispersed. Yet the performance lingers in the mind, like a play one cannot quite forget. He set the cup down with precision and leaned back in the velvet armchair. Why do people perform rather than reveal truth? The question had followed him across Europe, from the fjord to this quiet salon. Psychology offered the clearest answer. Fear. Fear of judgment, fear of loss, a fear of the raw self exposed to light. Society demands masks, elegant ones for the drawing room, dutiful ones for the family, loyal ones for business. Ingrid wore the mask of the devoted wife so long that relief felt like freedom when the husband died. Lars wore partnership while plotting escape. Erik wore the dutiful son while stealing from the till. Freya wore innocence while hiding love. Anna wore invisibility while burning with devotion. Each mask comfortable until the spotlight of truth burned too bright. Guilt always betrays the actor. The body cannot lie forever. Ingrid's dry handkerchief, Lars's damp shoes, Erik's untouched book, Anna's trembling hands when the vial was mentioned. Nielsen's steady pulse, proof of innocence by its very absence of tremor. The little grey cells observe these tells. The tremor that should be there but is not. The steadiness that should waver but does not. Performance exhausts. The authenticity endures. I am reminded, vividly, of the Roger Ackroyd case so many years ago now. A man murdered in his study, the household performing shock and grief with near-perfect coordination. The killer moved among them, helpful, concerned, outraged at the crime. He rehearsed every line, the concerned telephone call, the calm discovery of the body, the steady hands offering comfort. Yet one small psychological error. He pushed too eagerly for the case to be solved quickly, fearing the net would close. The body knows haste when guilt presses. In that affair, as in this one, the murderer played innocence so convincingly that suspicion circled elsewhere until the masks were stripped away one by one. The psychology of revelation is always the same. Confrontation forces the crack, pressure widens it, truth pours through. Here too, truth triumphed over performance. Ingrid's perfect grief crumbled under scrutiny. The alliance with Lars could not survive exposure. Freya's tears became real. Eric's anger lost its edge. Anna stepped from shadow into light. Even Nilsson, carrying only old resentment, found peace in being seen as innocent. Why does truth ultimately triumph? Because masks are heavy. They require constant rehearsal. Every glance calculated, every word measured, every tear timed. The mind tires. The body forgets its role for one fatal second. A dry handkerchief. A second walk in the snow. A letter half burned. One slip, and the curtain tears. Poirot touched his moustache with precision, a small, satisfied gesture. The theatre of crime has one enduring truth. Every actor eventually forgets their lines. They stumble, they hesitate, they reveal. And in that revelation lies justice. Not dramatic, not applauded, but quiet and certain. He rose and walked to the window. Outside, Brussels moved in its orderly way. People bundled against the cold, trams clanging softly. Life continuing without script or spotlight. But he thought of the fjord lodge, now empty, its crystal chandeliers covered in dust sheets, its velvet curtains drawn against winter. The stage had been reset for new players, new dramas. Yet the lessons of that night would linger for those who lived it. Freya would marry without fear. Eric would lead without deceit. Anna would find quiet purpose. Nilsson would heal without grudge. Ingrid and Lars would face judgment, not vengeance, but consequence. Poirot returned to his chair and lifted the tisane once more. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis, he said softly to the empty room, a faint smile curving beneath the magnificent moustache. Poirot will be watching.